Part 1. Induction. Close your eyes. Let the weight of the day fall away from you, your shoulders dropping, your breath slowing, your hands open and still beside you. Tonight, I want to tell you a story about kindness, not the dramatic kind, not the kind that asks for anything in return, the quiet kind, the kind that happens in the cold, on a snowy road, when no one is watching. Let the snow fall around you now, soft and slow, the world going white and silent. This is the story of an old man and an old woman, and 6 stone statues, and a night that changed everything. Part 2. The Old Couple and the Market. Long, long ago, in a small village deep in the mountains of Japan, there lived an old man and an old woman. They were very poor. Not the romantic kind of poor that people sometimes describe in stories, where poverty is picturesque and the humble home is charming. They were genuinely, practically poor, the kind of poor where you count grains of rice, where you wear the same patched clothing through every season, where you lie awake at night listening to the wind and calculate and worry, and then decide to stop worrying because worrying doesn't fill a rice bowl. And yet, they were not unhappy. They had each other. They had their small house, which kept out most of the wind, if not all of it. They had the mountains around them, which were beautiful regardless of the season. And they had a quality that poverty sometimes gives people when it doesn't break them, a kind of clarity, an understanding of what actually matters. The old man made straw hats. He had been making straw hats his entire life. His father had taught him, and his father before that. He knew how to weave the straw in the particular way that made a hat that would shed rain and keep the head warm, that would last through a whole season of hard work in the fields. The hats were good, solid, practical, made with care. One winter morning, a few days before the new year, the old man finished 5 hats. He held them up one by one in the pale winter light and examined them. Good hats, worth something at the market. His wife watched him. "If you can sell them at the market in town," she said, "we can buy rice for the new year. Maybe a little something else too." The old man nodded. He wrapped the hats carefully in cloth. He put on his own worn hat and his warmest coat. He bowed to his wife at the door and set out for the market, through the snow, along the mountain road. Part 3. The Road to Town. The road was long. In summer it was a pleasant walk, the mountains green on every side, the birds singing, the smell of pine and earth. In winter, it was something else entirely. The snow had been falling for days. The road was buried under a foot of white. The sky was the color of old pewter. The wind came down from the peaks in long, slow sweeps that found every gap in a coat. But the old man walked steadily. He was used to this road. He knew every bend, every place where the snow drifted deep, every sheltered spot where you could stop and rest your back against a rock. He walked for hours. He arrived at the market just as the other vendors were beginning to pack up their stalls. The snow had kept most of the buyers away. The market square was nearly empty. A few bundled figures hurried past, heads down, not stopping. The old man stood in the cold with his 5 hats and waited. One person stopped, looked at the hats, moved on without buying. Another came, examined one hat carefully, and walked away. He waited until the last stall was folding up, until the square was empty, until the cold had settled into his bones in the particular way that makes you understand why people build fires. He had sold nothing, not a single hat. He looked at the hats in his arms and felt something, not anger, not despair, something quieter than either of those, a kind of tired acceptance. He wrapped them carefully again and began the long walk home. Part 4. The 6 Jizo. The road home was harder than the road there. The snow was falling more heavily now. The light was fading. The temperature had dropped. His feet, which had been cold for hours, had stopped feeling cold in the way that is not a good sign. He moved steadily, one foot in front of the other, thinking of the fire at home, of his wife's face when she opened the door, of the way she never said anything unkind, even when things didn't go as hoped. And then, around a bend in the road, he saw them. 6 Jizo statues. They stood at the side of the road, as they always did, as they had stood for longer than anyone in the village could remember. Stone figures, perhaps 3 feet tall, the gentle round faces of the bodhisattva who watches over travelers and children. They were covered in snow. Snow had piled on their heads, on their shoulders, filling the folds of their stone robes. Their faces, patient and calm as always, were half buried in white. The old man stopped. He looked at them for a long moment. Something in his chest moved. These statues stood here in all weather, in the summer heat, in the autumn rain, and in the winter cold. They never moved. They never complained. They simply stood and watched over the travelers who passed. He looked at the snow piled on their stone heads. "You must be cold," he said softly. He felt slightly foolish for saying it. Stone doesn't feel cold. He knew that, but something in him said it anyway. He looked at the 5 unsold hats in his arms. He looked at the statues. He put a hat carefully on the first statue's head. He adjusted it so it covered the stone face properly, tucked it down against the wind. He moved to the second statue, another hat, the third, the fourth, the fifth. He stood back and looked. 5 statues with hats, 1 statue still bare, its stone head still piled with snow. The old man looked at the bare statue for a moment. Then he reached up and took off his own hat. He put it carefully on the 6th statue's head. He stood in the falling snow, his own head now uncovered, and looked at the 6 statues. They looked somehow warmer. He knew that was foolish, but it's what he felt. "There," he said quietly. "That's better." Then he turned and walked the rest of the way home, through the snow, without a hat, as the night came down around him. Part 5. The Old Woman Waiting. His wife was at the door when he came up the path. She had been watching for him. She could see from his face and from his arms that he had sold nothing. She said nothing about the hats. She said nothing about the money they didn't have. She looked at his head, bare and snow-covered, and said, "Where is your hat?" He told her. She was quiet for a moment. Something moved in her face, something that wasn't quite a smile, but was related to one. "Come inside," she said, "you're cold." She brought him to the fire. She made him tea from the little they had left. She sat across from him in the firelight. "You gave your own hat," she said. "There were 6 statues," he said. "I only had 5 hats." She nodded, as if that explained everything, because to her, it did. "We'll manage the new year," she said. "We always have." They sat together by the fire. Outside, the snow kept falling. The wind moved through the trees. The mountain was very quiet. They went to sleep early because there was nothing else to do, and sleep was warm. Part 6. The Sound in the Night. The old man woke in the night. He lay still for a moment, listening. Something had woken him, a sound from outside, not the wind, not the creak of the house settling in the cold. Something else, a sound like many feet in the snow, heavy feet moving slowly, and something else, something low and rhythmic, like voices, or a song, or both. He lay very still and listened. The sound grew closer. It was voices, 6 voices, low and deep and slow, chanting something he couldn't quite make out. His wife stirred beside him. "What is that?" she whispered. "I don't know," he said. They lay together in the darkness and listened as the sound came closer and closer and stopped. Right outside their door, a heavy sound like something being set down several times. Then, slowly, the voices moved away, growing fainter until they were gone, and there was only the wind and the snow and the silence of the mountain night. The old man and the old woman looked at each other in the darkness. Neither of them spoke. After a while, the old man rose. He went to the door. He opened it. Part 7. The Gift. The cold came in, and the light of the snow, which always makes the world brighter, even at night, came in with it. The old man stood in the doorway and looked, and then he was very still. because outside the door in the snow were more things than he could take in all at once. Bags of rice, more than they would need for a year. Bolts of cloth, good cloth, the kind you can make warm clothing from. Vegetables, pickled and preserved, enough to last through the winter. Coins, wrapped in paper, more than he had held in his hands in years. Food of every kind that keeps through winter, carefully wrapped, neatly arranged, and on top of everything, placed very carefully, were 6 straw hats, 5 new ones and 1 old, worn one that he recognized, his own hat. He stood in the doorway for a long time. The snow was still falling. The mountain was silent. The night was very deep. His wife came and stood beside him. She looked at what was outside their door. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, very softly, "The Jizo." He nodded. They stood together in the cold doorway, looking at the gifts, as the snow fell around them and the night breathed quietly over the mountains. Part 8. The New Year. They brought everything inside. It took several trips. Each time the old man went out and came back in, he half expected it to be gone. Each time, it was still there, real, solid, present. When everything was inside, they sat down on the floor in the middle of it all and looked at each other. His wife's eyes were bright, not from crying, exactly, from something adjacent to it, something that doesn't have a simple name. "We'll share it," she said. He knew she meant the rice, the cloth, the food. Some of it they would keep for themselves. Some of it they would share with the neighbors who were also struggling. Some of it they would leave at the shrine for those who had nothing at all. That was understood between them without discussion. It had always been understood. They cooked rice that night. Real rice. Not the thin gruel they had been making do with. They ate until they were full, which was an unusual sensation. And they talked, as they sometimes did in the evenings, about small things, about the mountain, about the neighbors, about a dream the old woman had had, about nothing important, about everything that mattered. Outside, the snow fell through the night. The 6 Jizo stood on the mountain road, as they always had, their stone faces patient and calm, and on their heads 6 straw hats, keeping out the cold. Part 9. What the neighbors said. In the morning, word spread through the village. The old man and his wife had received gifts in the night. Mysterious gifts. Left outside their door by no one anyone had seen. The neighbors came to look. Some were skeptical. Some were moved. Some were simply curious. The old man showed them his hat, the worn one. That had come back. He explained what he had done the evening before, the hats on the statues, his own hat on the 6th. People were quiet when he told this. An old woman from 2 houses down nodded slowly. "The Jizo remember," she said. "They always remember." Nobody argued with her. In the days that followed, The old man and his wife shared what they had been given. They shared rice with the family down the lane, who had 3 young children and almost nothing. They gave cloth to the woman whose coat had worn through entirely. They left offerings at the shrine. They kept enough for themselves to be comfortable, but not so much that they hoarded. The new year came, and it was. The old couple agreed. The finest new year they could remember. Not because of the rice or the cloth or the coins, though those things helped, but because of something harder to name. The feeling of having done the right thing in the cold, on a snowy road, when no one was watching, and having the universe, in its quiet and unhurried way, notice. Part 10. The Stone Faces. The old man visited the Jizo statues often after that. He would stop on his way to market, on his way home from gathering firewood. On ordinary days when he had no particular reason to pass that way, but went anyway, he would stand before the 6 stone figures and bow. He would leave small offerings, a handful of rice, a few dried persimmons, whatever he had. The statues stood as they always had, patient, still, their faces serene. Sometimes he talked to them. He felt less foolish about it now than he once had. He told them about the weather, about his wife, about the small events of the village. He didn't ask for anything. He had learned that winter that asking for things is not always the point. Sometimes the point is simply to give what you can, to cover someone else's cold head with your hat, to do it without expecting anything, and to be surprised and grateful when the night brings gifts. The hats he had put on the statues wore out over time, as straw hats do. He made new ones. Each year, before the new year, he would walk out to the 6 statues and replace the old hats with new ones. He did this every year for the rest of his life. Part 11. The Nature of Kindness. The old woman lived long and well after that winter. She often thought about what had happened, not the gifts themselves, though she was grateful for those, but what had caused them. Her husband, on a cold road, with nothing sold, walking home in the dark, had stopped, had looked at 6 stone statues covered in snow, had felt something, and had acted on it, without thinking about whether it made sense, without calculating what he would get in return, without even, she suspected, being entirely sure why he was doing it. He had simply given what he had, including the hat off his own head. She thought about this often. She thought that this was perhaps the only kind of kindness that meant anything, not the kind that is calculated, not the kind that expects return, not the kind that is performed for an audience, the kind that happens quietly in the cold when no one is watching, simply because there is a need and you have something to give. She thought that perhaps this was what the Jizo represented, not just the figures by the road, but the quality itself, the willingness to stand in any weather, to be present, to offer what protection you can without asking why. She grew very old, and on winter evenings, sitting by the fire, she would tell this story to anyone who came to visit. She always ended it the same way. "The Jizo remember," she would say. "They always remember." Part 12. Outro. The story is over now, but the snow is still falling, soft and slow, covering the world in white, and somewhere on a mountain road, 6 stone statues stand, their faces calm, their heads warm. Sleep now. Let the snow cover you gently. Let the cold stay outside. You are warm here. You are safe here.